Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Judy and I love travel, history, and finding out how people live. If you follow my blog, you probably already have guessed I'm not much of a shopper. Even so, a person has to eat and get clothing, so shopping venues are important to all of us. They are just as important to us now as they were in the days of Imperial Rome. Although the times were different and the location, a heavily populated urban center in downtown Imperial Rome rather than a relatively empty American suburb today, might be physically different, the object was the same then as now. Gather together more or less willing sellers and buyers, lubricate their interactions with food and beverage, perhaps provide some cultural space like a theater or a hall, and needed administrative space. Let's take a look at Imperial Rome's answer from the past and the lineal forebear of a smaller contemporary mall located in Northern Virginia. Today with me, the Armchair Traveler, as your guide. Trajan was a Roman emperor from 98 to 117 AD. He wanted to leave a legacy like no one other. The man had an ego. He was a soldier. He had expanded the empire, consolidated the borders, and promoted what we'd call infrastructure. Trajan wanted a massive establishment as a forever monument to himself, including a forum or a public meeting area, backed up with a multi-level, multi-purpose building, which today we call the market. This was a place where people could gather and, perhaps more importantly, business could be conducted as part of what he hoped would be his permanent economic legacy. Trajan's market, located in Rome near the imperial forums, was one of the most remarkable architectural and engineering feats of the ancient empire. Sometimes called the world's first shopping mall, the building was a multi-purpose, multi-story complex. Its form was semicircular and it contained about 150 shops and offices built into a hill in a multi-story six-level structure. The levels were actually connected with ramps rather than steps to make it easy. Escalators were 2 millennia in the future. Trajan and his architect, a man named Apollodorus of Damascus, a longtime personal associate of the emperor, built this thing to last. During the Middle Ages, the site was remodeled into a fortress, as were many other Roman imperial-era structures all over the former empire. The architects of the day added a tower called the Torre della Milizia. In the 16th century, the area was converted into a convent. Christians often repurposed the sturdiest buildings in the area for religious use, but that part was actually demolished in the 20th century when site restorations began. This image from Google Earth gives you some idea of the setting of the forum and the market. I added a yellow measure in the middle of what I think was probably the original forum. It measured around 300 meters from one end to the other. That's a little less than 1,000 feet, or about a fifth of a modern American mile. I've assumed that the forum was built symmetrically to enhance the view of the market, or perhaps the other way around. To the left, near the left end of my measure, stood Trajan's column. The column survives intact in the ruins of the forum. The marble column is what's called Doric order. It celebrates the emperor's many military victories and measures 125 feet tall when you include the pedestal or base. The pedestal contains a chamber that was supposed to serve as Trajan's tomb. His ashes were interred here originally in a gold urn right after he died in 117 AD. Those have long since been moved or perhaps lost, or possibly someone just stole the urn and dumped the ashes. The column originally featured a statue on top showing us Trajan himself, perhaps similar to this one with his arm reaching up in victory. Like the emperor's ashes, that statue disappeared, although we actually do know when. In the Middle Ages, Pope Gregory replaced the emperor with a statue celebrating St. Peter. I think that statue is a good reason the column survived intact during an age when so-called modern men were intent on destroying anything they imagined as somehow pagan. My photo here shows you a view of the forum and the market, along with a medieval tower as seen from the much more modern, and in my opinion architecturally unfortunate, Vittorio Emanuele Memorial. The market was too sturdy to fall down on its own and would have been too big and expensive to tear down, so it's been recycled. In 1574, Pope Pius V actually gave the area to the convent of St. Catherine of Siena, and an architect named Salustio Peruzzi redeveloped the site by adding a convent. As far as I can tell, however, they didn't modify the market itself. Since the beginning of the 20th century, excavations, site stabilization, study, and restoration have been ongoing as funding and the political situation permitted. Early in the century, that convent was torn down as a part of an effort to stabilize and restore the site to its original appearance. Benito Mussolini, always keen to ally his name and reputation with the giants of the Italian past, sponsored a major excavation of the imperial forums, including what we call the market, between 1928 and 1934. In the early 2000s, the market underwent further restoration and excavation, which continue to this day. This is an expensive and time-consuming proposition and literally filled with possible disaster, since excavating one item in an area so heavily built up over such a long period can easily mean destroying something else, possibly something even more important that we simply have forgotten about. The market itself was primarily constructed using concrete and brick, with much of the flooring originally covered in marble, although that seems to have disappeared. Marble was commonly used in Roman public buildings to convey wealth and prestige, particularly for flooring, staircases, and various decorative details. There would have been statues and mosaics, possibly even fish pools, to decorate the interior of the market itself. Some areas of the market may have also featured limestone elements, especially in structural or utilitarian components, but marble was preferred generally for the visible surfaces. The high-quality finishings of the market reflect its importance as a part of Trajan's grand plan. I don't have a shopper's directory for the market, but I do have a description of some of the things that were found inside. If you think about it, you'll find the same kinds of things in modern shopping malls. Inside on the ground floor was the equivalent of a food store. They had specialized markets and stalls selling food, wine, oils, and spices. Also inside on the ground floor was a large open hall, which the experts think may have been used for concerts, speeches, education, or public meetings. There were terraces and taverns located on the third level, and which were accessible from the street on the outside. There were ponds and fish tanks, and the streets around it were also lined with smaller commercial complex buildings. In short, everything that you found there today could be found in similar forms sometimes in modern American shopping centers and malls. On the left is that aerial view of Trajan's market. On the right is a diagram of the Colonnade at Union Mill, which is a suburban mall in Fairfax, Virginia. When you compare the remains of the Roman area with the modern American mall, the similarities actually jump right out at you. In Trajan's market, as today, those arms of the market embrace a large open area. Trajan's market embraced a forum, which would have had other buildings. Today we're confronted with that essential sidekick of all suburban malls, a vast parking lot. The original market was a multi-story building set into the hill. Today's example couldn't do that. It's set on flat land, and it only has one story. The modern architect wanted to make it look grander than it was, so he added false fronts to suggest a second story and make it look bigger. The original forum boasted a temple dedicated to Trajan himself, although as far as I know, the diggers are still looking for the exact site. Trajan was deified almost immediately after his death, and he raided a temple, which must have been built pretty soon after that. In our 20th century example, in the possible corresponding areas, we see a Shell gas station and a bank. I suppose either one of these might be thought to correspond to a temple or a monument to the builders, or at least to the people who financed this space. If nothing else, looking at Trajan's market and forum and a modern American shopping mall show us that the more things change, the more they can stay the same. I hope you enjoyed this tour of Trajan's forum, his market, and learning how Roman architectural design and construction live on, although with different names, but similar details and functions to this day. Come back next time for another adventure with me, the Armchair Traveler, as your guide.